Hello and welcome to our webcast for Write a Will Week. Now, have you got a will? Nearly 28 million of us don't, and while it may be no surprise that 90% of the under 30s haven't got round to writing a will, a quarter of people in their 60s haven't either. And the most common reason? Well, just not getting round to it yet. So what are the implications? Joining me is solicitor Peter Nellist from Clarke Willmott and independent financial advisor Danny Cox from Hargreaves Lansdown. Thanks for joining us. Let's start off, Danny, by looking at what happens if you don't make a will.
Well, the thing is with a will, Christian, is it's the only way that you can make sure that the right people benefit from your assets and from your estate when you die. So if you don't have a will, your wishes aren't clear, and in fact the rules of intestacy apply, which is a government laws, which effectively means the government decides by statute how your estate is distributed. So to make your wishes clear, you absolutely need to have a will.
Peter?
I think with a will, think the three C's: costs, control and certainty, and that steers you in the right direction as to why you ought to put one in place. There's some terrible things happen if you die intestate. It can go to people you don't know, and sometimes, at the very worst, it ends up going to the state if we can't find any relatives.
In terms of making a will, if you're going to do it properly, what do you need to bear in mind?
Well, you need to bear in mind, I mean, Peter will be able to talk more about mental capacity, but you need to make sure you're of sound mind, that your wishes are very, very clear. Your will needs to be witnessed, and it needs to be witnessed by two people who witness your signature as you do it, and they also need to make sure that they're not beneficiaries either.
So it's really worthwhile doing it properly, getting onto your website, Unbiased website, and just checking for a good financial and or legal advisor, going to see two or three of them and seeing what they can offer.
Let's just follow up with on costs, because one of our viewers, Yvonne Murray, has written in and said, how much should it cost to make a will, and is that it, or should I expect to have to pay, subsequent amounts of money?
You shouldn't expect to have to pay storage fees, and you shouldn't expect to have to pay fees to get the will out of storage. As to how much to make a will, it could be anywhere from £100, and the good thing with most professional advisors is they'll tell you beforehand exactly how much it's going to cost in writing before you're committed.
Okay, excellent. Now, the research has shown that I think 2/3 of families with children under 18 haven't written a will. Danny, when should you write a will?
Well, I think you need to write a will whenever you have family interests, whenever you have assets, whenever you have something specific that you want to be able to happen with your estate, or, for example, with your burial requests or your funeral arrangements. So it's really at any time that when you want to make your wishes clear after you die. So it's pretty much as soon as you become 18, but particularly when you have children.
I think it's time to turn to some of the questions that we've had in, to bring in Peter Benson. He's got a complicated case. He says he's married again now, and he has 5 children from 2 prior relationships and no will. He wants to make provision for only one of those 5 prior children, as well as his current wife, with whom he has no children. He asked if the other children would have a claim on his estate, and would that change if he had a will, because he doesn't have one right now.
Well, from the facts you've given me, I can't answer that. I'm going to have to give you a typical lawyer's answer, maybe. One of the another important fact to keep in mind is that you have a statutory duty to make reasonable provision for dependents under a 1975 Act of Parliament. So you need to talk the details of the circumstances through with a specialist to see if there is an obligation there.
One more thing about children before we move on to other things. G. Richards has an autistic son requiring intensive support. The son lives in a home providing care, and the son receives full state benefits, and he has an unmarried daughter. He's concerned that if he were to die, his son would lose entitlement to benefits if the assets were split 50-50. How can he make sure that the will only gives him money for extra expenses like holidays, and the son does not lose benefits? The daughter would get more than him, so would the carers for the son be able to challenge the will?
Well, certainly you can use trusts in order to be able to pass benefits or to hold benefits for the benefit of an autistic child, or for somebody who doesn't have, who perhaps is still not of majority yet, so still as a child. So you can use a discretionary trust. You do need specialist advice to be able to do that, to ensure that they don't lose benefits from the state in doing so.
Okay. A discretionary trust and a considered choice of executors would be 2 of the most important considerations in that case.
Paul has written to say, I'm not married but have 2 children. Will they inherit my estate, or will my partner get everything?
Well, the short answer is that the partner will get nothing. Unless it's written very specifically in a will, the partner has no legal entitlement whatsoever unless there are jointly held assets. So, yes, the children might get something, or they might get all of the estate, but the key issue here is there needs to be a will to make sure that exactly the right people benefit from his estate, whether it's his partner, his children, or both.
Otherwise, the partner there is forced to make a claim under the 75 Act for reasonable provision.
Now, here's a knotty one for you. S. Berg has written, he said, "How can I stop my elderly grandfather losing his money on the stock market? He claims to have lost £300,000 last year. That's my inheritance. So, yes, that makes me selfish, but he's just wasting money dealing with these so-called advisors. Surely there can be some way we can stop this."
If he's got full capacity, and that's probably a major issue if he's an elderly grandfather, I don't think there is. You can put your money out to Las Vegas if you're fully compos mentis.
It sounds to me like he really needs some financial advice rather than playing the market.
It does sound like he needs some financial advice, and I think this is where he could perhaps get involved with his grandfather's affairs, see exactly what his grandfather is doing, where the money is invested, and perhaps get a second opinion. Look for another independent financial advisor from the unbiased site and check to see exactly what advice he is getting at this time.
Let's move on to some of the large assets when we're dealing with how to write a will. Alan Hartop's written, "I'm currently trying to pass my money on to my 3 children in order to avoid inheritance tax. Could you tell me exactly how this works? I'm aware I have to stay alive for 7 years, but I'm concerned that as a chronic chain smoker, I might not make it."
Right. Well, there's a couple of ways that you can pass money on without inheritance tax consequences. There are exempt gifts that you can make. So you can give an annual exemption of £3,000 a year from capital with no inheritance tax consequences whatsoever. On top of that, you can also make gifts from surplus income, effectively income that you're not spending on your normal day-to-day living. You can give away without any inheritance tax consequences. Once you go past that, any gifts that you make beyond perhaps those gifts you make on marriage, they will all be subject to inheritance tax or some form of inheritance tax if you die within 7 years of making that gift. But that assumes that your estate, again, is worth more than the nil rate band, worth more than currently £325,000.
Let's move on to some of the procedural issues now. About how to make a legal will. There's a story in the papers recently that Father Ignatius Brown has read. Just to bring you up to speed, it was Beatrice Southwell who wrote a new will with the help of some Help the Aged advisors who witnessed this will. And in it, she gave the bulk of her £350,000 estate to that charity in the place of long-standing friends who'd originally benefited from the previous will. They challenged and lost. Father Brown has said, how can this new will be made without 2 truly independent witnesses? Are they no longer required? If one person can sit down with another and advise them to make a will that benefits their employer, how is this not leaving the door open to massive fraud and coercion? Let's start with you on this one, Peter.
Thank you very much. Well, there's several issues coming to mind. One is the formal rules, and there's a bit of a loophole there, isn't there, from what you've been saying. Capacity is another issue, undue influence is another issue. So again, if all of this had been done before a decent advisor, a good professional advisor, and they'd taken all the steps, it would have been a lot clearer. Certainly at that stage, you'd want to consider the previous will and say to the person making the will, hang on a minute, why are you cutting these people out now? There may be a very good reason, but nice to have it documented.
What should you do if you have a will, and what's the right way, the foolproof way of going about making the right will?
Well, in terms of making the right will, you need to make sure that you have mental capacity, as we've talked about. Your wishes need to be very, very clear, so you need to be able to list the types of assets that you want to pass on, specific heirlooms, etc. You want to make sure that the beneficiaries are very clear. So normally we would recommend that, apart from sort of specific items, that you list the legacies in terms of a percentage of estate rather than a monetary value. You need to choose executors. Now, executors are the people who are going to decide or are going to administer your estate after you've gone. So they should be either a very close family friend, someone you can trust, or perhaps a relative. Or if you have a slightly contentious situation, it's a good idea to get a professional executor, a lawyer or solicitor involved.
Danny, it sounds like the top team for this is a solicitor and a financial advisor. Like we've got 2 right here. What's the best way to find the most suitable one?
Well, you can either look for, if you've got a personal recommendation from a friend or a colleague, that works very well. The alternative is you go to a search engine such as the Unbiased website, where you can search for specialists in inheritance tax planning, in will writing in your area. There's the search that operates by postcode. You get a list of different specialists, and I also think it's important that you shop around. As Peter was saying earlier, do take a second opinion.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much. That's all we've got time for. I hope you find our webcast for Writer Will Week interesting. Thanks to my guest, Peter Nellist from Clarke Willmott, and Danny Cox from Hargreaves Lansdowne. Now, I suppose, go and put your affairs in order has got to be the answer. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.